Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Rethink webinar on Age of AI and Ethical Tech. We're joined by an all-female panel this time, which we're very excited about. So today we'll be highlighting the voices and visions of women at the forefront of AI, talking about things like fairness, transparency, and social impact, looking at what it means to innovate responsibly. We'll discuss all sorts of things, including bias, strategies for creating transparent AI, the importance of ethics and accountability long-term, and real-world success stories of building ethical AI. We just had a conversation about this, like ethics. We'll ask some questions about what ethics actually are, but I wanted to set the stage for what the dictionary actually says ethics are. So a set of moral principles, principles governing groups, a consciousness of moral importance, or a guiding philosophy. And this is what ChatGPT on the left had to say about staying ethical and what kind of responses are given. And on the right, you'll see Perplexity's response. So to kick us off, Cindy and Lewis will tell us a little bit about Rethink.
Yeah, so Chelsea, maybe we can move away from the slides.
Yep.
So welcome everyone. Really great to see everyone this morning. Very, very excited for this panel. Chelsea and I founded Rethink about a year ago, and we're super excited to have this incredible opportunity to offer AI consulting. Rethink is essentially made up of Chelsea, myself, and Brandon. Brandon's based in Chicago, Chelsea's in Lisbon, I'm in the Bay Area. What we are is a strategic consultancy, and we offer advice on AI strategy. We help you with your AI strategy as well as business strategy and go-to-market growth strategy. So we have like 3 or 4 different areas that we consult on. We also do AI development for those that are interested. We offshore AI development. And yeah, we're very excited about this opportunity. I've been networking a lot with other founders and VCs in the Bay Area. And we feel there's like a lot of help needed for AI strategy. People aren't sure which AI tools to adopt, whether they need bespoke proprietary tools or whether they actually need just to start from scratch. So we look at how to automate your business using agentic AI, as well as conversational AI, generative AI. So just really, really excited about this webinar today. I feel like it's an honor to be here with Olga and Sandra and Chelsea. I've known them all for many years. And they're all super talented female founders. We're all-star panel. It's just incredible to be here today amongst everyone. And, welcome. We're very excited to kick off a great conversation. Grab a cup of coffee and make yourself at home. And
Yeah,
also,
and
if you want a free consultation, so anyone on this webinar, we're happy to give you a 30 to 1 hour free consultation. So just ping us if you want to hit us up for a consultation. Chelsea, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so Sandra and Olga, I'd love for you to introduce yourselves and tell us how AI plays a role in your professional world. Sandra, how about you first?
Okay, well, hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. It's such a pleasure to be here and talk about AI. As I was reflecting on this particular discussion, I was thinking about my history in technology, and we all can agree that this is yet the next tectonic shift in the world of tech. If we recall, we had the home PC, we also had the internet, we had mobility and cloud computing. And so for me, in terms of the world of AI, it's just like the previous technology shifts. And so embracing them and understanding how we can leverage the tools to our strategic advantage is really important. So I was part of the tech industry. I decided to pivot, and I have my fractional CMO firm. I'm also an angel investor. And so my responsibility and accountability that I have in the companies that I'm in service to is how do we help drive the greatest efficiencies and grow the companies and scale faster than we would normally could without AI. And then on the investment side, I really take a look at tools that I think are going to be, I would say, indispensable in managing your organization and operational excellence. So for me, when you take all the different types of AI, whether agentic or generative AI, machine learning, it's really about operational AI and driving efficiencies and generating revenue. So that's how I look at AI in my day-to-day world. It's $1.8 trillion of a business in 2030. So it's here to stay, and our opportunities to figure out how do we leverage it to our advantage on a day-to-day basis.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Today I get up in the morning to help people accelerate revenue by having a better relationship with their contract. I'm CEO of TermScout, where we are the first contract certification platform that removes friction from B2B delays by certifying contracts as fair, market ready, and free of landmines. We use AI to analyze legal agreements so buyers and sellers can close faster with trust and confidence and maintain that relationship throughout their relationship. For us, AI isn't about replacing anything, lawyers or relationships. It's about scaling with clarity and trust across deal cycle. In my past life, I am a tech lawyer by design. I served as in-house lawyer, general counsel, and CEO now of multiple companies, and I'm really excited to talk about the ethics, the implications of AI, and how it's going to improve our lives and commerce.
Amazing. What a great diverse set of knowledge we have here. So I'd love to kick us off with what exactly are ethics, and can they be objective, or do they always bias to a particular group? Maybe let's start with a lawyer, Olga.
Law and ethics are two different things. Law tends to be a floor, ethics tends to be a ceiling. And the difference, I joke, is your consciousness. But I'm going to focus this question because we could have a whole webinar about it. And frankly, philosophizing about ethics or laws is not something that folks want to hear me do. I'm not sure if I want to hear myself do that. But I think in business, ethics is all about building systems that are predictable, explainable, and fair, not just for your team, but for your customers, partners, and the public. And that's one of the reasons I recently joined TermScout. That's why the mission of the company resonated with me. I do think that pure sort of objectivity may be a myth, but transparency isn't. And if you can use AI to explain, to improve your relationships, to be clear, to build relationships on trust and confidence, I think that really, it may not make you ethical everywhere, but it will certainly help you to get a good start to trend that way. And so I'm really excited about leading a company that allows folks to build relationships on confidence and trust, and in the process ask themselves, how can I show up better? How can I be more ethical? How I can do the right thing.
Amazing. I love the difference that you gave between transparency and bias. I'm going to do some thinking about that. Sandra?
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, ethics is just in a way to operate a business. You highlighted, I think, Chelsea, when you talked about the definition of ethics, you looked at the definition and you talked a little bit about fairness, transparency, accountability, privacy, societal impact. And the same thing applied to social media. And so for me, it's really about the leadership that exists that's driving AI, whether you are a founder of an AI company or you're one of the top 5 technology companies. The question is ethics even part of your philosophy and your values of how you operate your business? And for me, and some companies are not. So I will, there's large companies that are recipients of billions of dollars of the government, the US government, to drive AI innovation. I look and observe, ethics is all about, societal impact. It requires a lot of water to cool the data centers. And it was an interesting thing that I think Sam Altman came out and said, it costs money when you say thank you or please to the AI chatbot. It's about I think it's 3 bottles of 16 ounce of water for a 100-word email. These companies that I think make a lot of money off AI, what are they doing for our society? And so ethics is a choice. And for me, as a leader in the technology industry, whether it was back in the social media, whether it was back in the when I was working at Intel, silicon on the chips, it requires a lot of water. And it was also in terms of the materials of the mines and really thinking about where do you want to play in history during this next phase of technology revolution. And so my challenge to myself and my challenge to people that I interact with is, let's have these hard conversations and figure out which side of history you want to be on in terms of ethics. And I'm equally vocal, challenging big companies where I think there's a lack of oversight, of understanding the unbiases that exist in the outcomes of the data sets that are happening, and informing some of the algorithms. So I just personally believe there's a lot of work to be done in the area of ethics, and it's often ignored. It's basically profits over ethics.
Which brings me to the next foundational question, which is, how do we ensure that AI actually enhances our human lives versus creates greater and greater efficiencies and cuts us out of the equation with no jobs and maybe less inspiration to do anything in our lives? Like, how do we build something that builds us more towards a techno utopia versus the opposite? Sandra.
I think it's really about, it's kind of like currently, and I hate, like, it's kind of like the rhetoric that's happening in today's macro society is you have to be vocal. So for me, when I look at these tools and I evaluate from a founder or an investor, talking to the founders, really asking the hard questions, like, where are you? So a conversation happened yesterday, literally. There's a startup, they're looking for Series A round of funding. They're in the marketing area. They're helping to drive efficiencies around the promotional mix, which I think is pretty impressive. And they have significant IP. And as an investor, I spent a lot of time, forget about the returns, right? When the revenue and the projections and the TAM and the SAM, I really wanted to understand, where are your data sets coming from? And then, whether the primary data set, secondary, and I spent a lot of time, it was very uncomfortable, but for me, that was really important because in that process, I was trying to figure out, is the data set biased? Do we need to create and enter new types of data so that we can inform and ensure that the promotional mix that's being provided is inclusive of all social economic classes? So this was around, it was around entertainment and sports and optimizing the ticket sales. And so that was a really fascinating conversation. We have not finished the conversation because I'm really going to get into the technology and really understand that. But I do think it starts with us. It starts with one person asking the hard questions. It starts with Olga, the founder, and making sure that she can represent the most ethical company that exists around smart terms. And so I really think that movements happen with one person. And then out of that meeting yesterday, I'm sure she felt like, wow, people actually do care about the equity and making sure that the data sets are unbiased. Versus as an investor, you're just thinking about, am I going to get the 7x return? How quickly am I going to get it? So the conversation that she had with me was probably very different from other VCs and investors where they were thinking about money. I was thinking about, can I put a dollar into this company, and can I represent it as the most ethical company that exists and use that as a showcase that it can be done?
So it starts with us. It's true. I think you're right. Okay, moving on to some legal questions for Olga and ethics. How should organizations tackle legal gray areas when it comes to AI?
Huh. I think the technical answer is one tackle at a time. But I guess maybe, I was reflecting on Sandra's answer around, what does it cost to use AI and what does it mean to be responsible? There's an input, could be represented in water or some other sort of energy. And, we as, inhabitants of planet Earth value that resource quite a lot, increasingly so. And then, something happens in that black box of AI and output comes out. And a real question is, was this worth it? Was the effort and the input and the whole consumption of resources worth it? That's a really good question, which is, as a founder, I like to focus on narrow problem that are worth solving. I think inherently, if you start from that perspective, then calibrating input and whether it's worth the output uh, becomes sort of the optimization effort every builder engages in. And so when I choose to join a company or when I start building, because I have three projects that I'm building through Codex, which is um, part of Stanford Law School of Informatics effort to help lawyers to digitize. Um, I started with, is this a problem worth solving? And will that enhance lives or will it take away from lives? Is it big enough? Is it impactful enough? And so for me, you know, that's one of the, again, the reasons why Term Scout mission resonated is because I think improving relationships in commerce is a goal worth solving. Generally, improving relationships is a goal worth solving, and our broken relationships with contracts, just generally, independent of what your income bracket or title is just so pervasive that I'd like to be able to solve it for at least some people. And I would say for me, that would be a goal worthy accomplishing. And then looking back and optimizing whether the input that I use for AI is something I will look back to optimize to make sure that it was all worth it. But I think the goal is big enough. I think the answer to that is yes. But you asked me also the second question from the legal perspective, how do you do it? And I flippantly said, one step at a time. But, your contracts also reflect your positions on AI. And, a lot of those sort of questions that Sandra just mentioned, what's the input? Who has the rights? Is the data clean? Where did you get it? What are you going to do with it? All of those questions are actually the first. If you're asking, like, what does a company do? I tell everyone to go look at their contracts because that's actually where they have to think about it. One, because they want to make sure they get some rights. They also make sure they broker correctly their rights. Now increasingly you have regulations. And so we actually have our customers, many of our customers are sell to SMB companies. And those conversations come up in commerce, like, what's your AI? What's in it? How do you use it? I look at your contracts. I still have some question. What is in your contracts? And again, that doesn't help commerce or relationships. So many of our customers come to us and say, can you use your AI to scan our contracts and give a full disclosure about who we are, at least contractually speaking? If they still have operational questions, they can engage with our operators. And so many of our customers have asked to essentially provide certification around the AI posture and kind of the responsible use of AI. And so we working with, this is, I guess, pre-announcements, I suppose. We're now working with a number of our customers to actually help you build relationship with your prospective or current customers around your relationship with AI as disclosed in your contract, because every contract today discloses that relationship contractually. Anyway, if you have any interest to be part of that group, it's actually a fairly sizable group at this point, to provide feedback, let me know. because it's going to be something we build on over time. Because I do think, contractually speaking, the way AI shows up is a moving target. We're very much in the beginning. As someone who understands contracts as mechanisms, I expect them to evolve quite a lot in the next 3 to 5 years. And we are creating essentially a structured data set around that evolution, and can have very intentional conversations about the trends and what it means, to build relationships that you can base your business on, that with AI in your contracts.
Yeah, I guess essentially, eventually, contracts could be in the form of robots or things that look like humans, right? Like,
Robots don't have to look like humans.
but
I
I
know,
think
I know it's really impossible for us to imagine anything good
Want
that is not in
dinosaurs?
our likeness. However, there are many
It's true.
alternatives to the likeness of this.
Should have AI plants and things. So should
It's funny you say that. Instagram keeps implying that I need a significant other made of AI. I showed it to my. This is not a joke. This is true. There's
Oh,
something
I know.
about my activities on internet that Instagram thinks that this is what I'm missing in my life. I laughably share it with my spouse, and it gives us some form of levity.
I love that.
Amazing.
That's where
So
AI for good, that's where you talk about AI for good. It has, psychologists have identified AI being great for those that are depressed and are lonely, the ability to have a virtual friend. And so I think that's an interesting in terms of when you look at right side of history, that could be really great in terms of addressing the lonely epidemic that exists in our society today.
Sandra, my spouse said that I thought most people outgrow imaginary friends by the by the time they go to middle school.
Yeah.
Apparently, this is not true for this middle-aged woman.
I love that. I
according to
love
the
that.
algorithms,
I
at
wanted
least.
to add to that. I think it's really great, that we have this ability to chat, to even, have a conversation with ChatGPT, if we're feeling lonely or down, or, AI becomes our friend, like you're saying. But at the same time, I think we have to be careful that, like some of my friends will chat to ChatGPT like it's a therapist. And, you have to be careful. Sometimes it hallucinates, right? So you have to be careful on the advice that you're getting from ChatGPT. Is it actually, hallucinating, or are the comments it's making really relevant? It's that's another thing that you can add to ethics, is that you cannot replace a real life therapist with ChatGPT. You can in essence, but it's not necessarily going to have the 15 years training and qualifications and degrees, master's degrees, etc. Right? So I think that's where it could be a
Friends,
conflict.
for that matter.
I know. I would say unless you've created a customized ChatGPT that's driven by psychiatric research, so you create your own, virtual psychologist that takes all the data of what true human doctors have taken and learned and applied it into, that goes back, like, where's the data sets? What are the algorithms? And it could help. I mean, going to therapy, at least I'm in San Francisco, to go to a therapist, it costs $400 to $300 an hour, which is ridiculous. So the affordability of getting access to a therapist for many is non-existent.
Yeah.
So being able to provide a virtual therapist for those that may not be able to afford it could be a game changer, but it goes back to this entire conversation. So
Yeah.
in the end, I totally agree with you. ChatGPT is not the platform to provide advice. However, if the medical industry takes the power of what AI can do, which is digest all these data sets to form possible recommendations, it's a start, right? So
Totally. I think also just on that, I think what's really important is it's a good segue into, you also like the whole replacing humans with robots story and AI. I think that's where like rethink comes in, and that Chelsea and I, are able to have live conversations about strategy with people. And yes, you can put strategy into ChatGPT and, create a whole strategy document. You can create websites, you can create anything on ChatGPT these days, but you don't necessarily have that reasoning that a real life person can give you, that strategic ability. And that's what we do at Rethink, is we're actually able to advise you strategically on what tools you need and what business strategy you should have. And you can't buy that. Like, I have that conversation with people every day at conferences, or with VCs and investors. They're always interested in, why did you choose consulting as a path? You come from Capgemini, obviously there's a lot of consulting, but you come from Intel and Ericsson and high tech. But what is it about AI strategy that makes you different? And I guess this is it, right? It's that intersection of where a human meets kind of the reasoning of an algorithm. And I think, Olga, you're the same. Your legal expertise, right? You cannot necessarily box that into something and become a robot. Like, you have that ability to have that emotion behind it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I have a research project we call Virtual Gabby. Virtual Gabby is not a therapist. Virtual Gabby is a virtual mediator. It helps parent one and parent two to reach parenting plan, and it is train. My business partner is a well-known, highly regarded, published, New York Times bestseller and endorsed by Gwyneth Paltrow, for what that is worth. We had this really deep discussion before we started building and what it means to build. Her name is Gabrielle Hartley, so I'll let you guess how we came up with Virtual Gabby. It's a total mystery how we came with that name. And so Virtual Gabby solves this really narrow problem of getting two parents who may or may not have been married, because it turns out you can have babies without marriage, and increasingly so in our society. And every child, I think, deserves a parenting plan. If you never dealt with a parenting plan, I never had to deal with it, so I had to learn what it is. What it is basically a very detailed plan of who picks up, who drops off, what happens on Christmas or Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate, who is paying for, but all the mundane things that actually is operationalizing your child's life if you don't happen to be married. In my case, I'm not even aware of this because my husband deals with all this stuff. So I had to learn what it means to really operationalize raising a child as part of building this, which I thought was really, really fascinating exercise. But all of that to say is majority of kids in the United States do not have access to parenting plan. And so as a result, we raise adults who, maybe do not live to their potential because they have not been properly raised, because they did not have predictability in their life of who picks them up. As a child, you can imagine that could, affect your life as an adult, for example, who may not have had the best Christmas or Hanukkah, whatever they celebrated, or some other holiday. And so, it started with sort of philosophical discussion. Can we ever, replace virtual mediator? And I asked my business partner, how much does she cost? And when she told me, I decided that I will never get divorced. At least when my kids are it's just cheaper to stay married. I'm joking. But all of that to say, by a quick calculation, we realized that it's not just, indigent, for example, who are excluded from her services. It's working poor and lower middle class and actual middle class. And so you kind of realize how long that tail of underserved population is. And that technology actually gives you this ability. So now I've been building this for about a year. Started as a research with the first question: can a bot even actually be in between two humans and mediate, which is a very different bot than the one you have conversation one-to-one. It took us about 6 months to kind of figure out what that architecturally looks like, and then number of months to figure out that it actually provides useful things. And we finally sort of got it in the form that it's supposed to be, and it actually can guide two parents who may or may not ever loved each other, who are not in domestic violence or committed to litigation, because if they are in any of those things, Virtual Gabby has nothing to offer them. But if they sort of have some shared mindset around, hey, we want to raise a responsible adult, and we both need to kind of get on the same page about this, Virtual Gabby can go through exercise of escalation, de-escalation, education, essentially giving you the term sheet or the output of what it will take, the agreement, to get from point A to point B. And if your circumstances change, she will remediate all over again. And I think that's actually important. Access to justice, this small thing, having every child, independent of the income of their parents, have a certainty of who picks them up from school, what they're doing for Christmas, and who pays their medical bill, I think is incredibly important. We're now testing it with a few legal aids and a few software companies that provide tools to lawyers. And so I actually very much believe in technology. And as part of it, we're asking very intentional questions. For example, about coercive control in marriages. One spouse tends to dominate, and those bad relationships tend to lead to divorce and sometimes to all kinds of other things. And so one of the things we worry about, for example, how much one parent will control another in reaching that agreement. And so one of the things we're intentionally building is various bumps and reading the sort of atmosphere in the virtual room where the two parents may or may not be together to red flag human dynamics that are not good, that may not result in a good parenting plan, for example. And so anyway, all of that to say, if you solve the problem worth solving, that improves our lives, and it's a narrow enough problem, you can figure out how to solve it. And then as process of solving, you will have questions about qualifications, what it means to be trained, and stuff like that. Um, and you can problem solve throughout the building for that. I will maybe end with one more thing. We often point out that bots hallucinate. Humans hallucinate too. We just call them liars. And
About that, Olga.
they do all the time.
Yeah.
In fact,
All the manipulators are liars.
manipulator
Or
liars. In fact, we actually,
disorder.
if you're somebody who I actually notice that I've learned that I flag it every time is not something that will make me make friends. And if you go through life noticing it is actually quite annoying. You just kind of build your tolerance for that. And so and we told all of that to say we have a fairly large margin for error or lying, whether it's intentional or white or whatever. We have like the whole vocabulary, what it means to talk about it. And somehow I'm just going to point out that when it comes to machine, we're very black and white. Like 1% hallucination, we're going to dismiss that machine as no good. Whereas if like a human hallucinated or lied 1% of the time, we would basically think that that's an amazing human.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to point that out and leave it out there. So if we're going to approach machines versus human in such drastic way, then we will not be solving like the most pressing, important problems of our times, such as access to justice or access to therapy, which I know absolutely nothing about. But it sounds like something that I would like many people to have access to. I would love somebody to explore it with the same passion as I am exploring what it means to have access to justice.
I think it's one thing that's really important. I think Wandia, I want to make sure I pronounce her name correctly.
Yeah, Wendia.
Wandia.
Yeah.
In the chat, she talked about conscience, and technology will never have it. The notion of being able to truly feel sad,
Totally.
happiness. I did have a co-parenting plan. I did have a therapist be involved. No technology could capture the moment where I just started crying at a point of one of the agreements that the therapist was coming around like the holidays. And she tapped into that, and I didn't really want to talk about it, but then she realized that there was something happening in me that was really important, unbeknownst to me, which affected the entire parenting plan around this very specific thing. Technology can't capture that, but it's a start, right? It's a start, like it's a door opener, but let's realize that there are limitations. I mean, in the world of marketing, one thing, the greatest art of marketing is a true understanding of your consumer audience. And one of the best ways to do that is through ethnography research. And what is ethnography research? You go in and you understand the cities, you go inside that person's home. It gets to, as a human being, the cultural, social, and emotional context of why a person does X. AI will talk about the, what, like, why are the consumers are buying, what are they clicking on, and what are they saying online? But the cultural nuance will never be captured in AI. And a CEO of a very, 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 very large global toy company, publicly traded, he was talking about this not in the context of AI. He was talking about this in the context of the type of board member they needed to hire. And he said it was through ethnography research that we went into people's home that we knew that the mother played this critical role that helped inform some product development and ultimately drove multi-billion dollars. But there was this little research that happened and they got this aha moment. And so when he was hiring for the board seat, he said, and this is just recently with all the DE&I rhetoric, he's like, the board member must be a woman, must have these traits, and I will not entertain any other talent except, it has to have the fit this. AI would never have been able to identify that little aha moment. And so I think, in our conversation of what is it? Elon Musk said, 100% of marketing will be AI. He doesn't really understand the science of marketing.
Yeah, maybe maybe I'll inject some drama and disagree just a little.
No.
I mean, I don't disagree with the part of 100%, but let me kind of share a couple of things that give me insight. I talk to a lot of our customers, and I take all the recorded calls and drive it through AI for insights that I might have missed, and then it turns out with even my attention span, which is pretty high, I can concentrate for hours. I used to negotiate deals for 8 hours a day. I can have a pretty high attention span sitting in one place and registering everything that happens. I miss the most incredible insight on every call.
Yeah.
It turns out being human is a challenge, even for a highly trained
I agree.
human. And there is also research that, and we actually we now have tested virtual Gabby with various folks who've been through divorce or are going through divorce under highly controlled conditions. And it turns out, some people like this human piece where they like feel seen by another human, and they're like sort of like what I call soul touching moment. But it turns out other people actually prefer the soul touching moment to be with a bot. They feel less judged, and they much more likely to open up. They don't feel the whole thing, and so it's really interesting. I don't think it's an either or. It's sort of like choosing between the fork and the spoon. Which one is better? Well, it kind of depends on what you're eating and how long you're at the table. Because the longer you are, the more tools you're gonna need. You probably will also need a napkin and possibly other things. So I would say the depths we actually find people who experiment with virtual Gabby who went through divorce in the past actually wish they had her because they are not on the clock and they could have more exploratory conversations that are educational and actually give them tools to continue de-escalating their relationship for the benefit of a child. So it's a really interesting. I think the extent I agree with you, Sandra, is that 100% replacement of human is not going to be happening. I think there is an incredible value that technology can bring to the table. And what I think, and I have a talk about this, is we need to look at alignment and kind of essentially assess technology as partnership. Like I assess every human who comes into my life. Are they aligned with me? Are they on the same mission? Do I want them in my life? Will my life be better if I spend another minute, or will it be worse? And I think that's kind of that approach to partnership. What do you bring to the table? What do I bring to the table? Can we make 1+1 be much, much greater than 2? That calculation, not being asleep behind the wheel, being intentional about it, I think that's important for any powerful technology. I mean, even the hammer, but definitely something like AI, that alignment and discernment and making sure that the partnership is of value.
I agree with you. It's not either or, it's an and.
Okay.
And I would add to it, like, I think we just need to understand, like, Where does it make sense and where it doesn't make sense? And I think this goes back to Chelsea, to ethics, right? Ethics, like ethical AI.
Let's return
Let's
to
return to
ethics.
the ethics debate. Yeah, we've kind of gone off.
No, it's all good actually. These dialogues have covered some of the questions and things that we wanted to chat about anyway through like real life examples, which is the whole point. But Sandra, I'd love to understand for you as an investor, how do you evaluate the ethical considerations of AI startups and things that you would potentially invest in?
Yeah, I think we've talked about it. And I know like Olga started with like, the way I look at investments are, what problem are you solving? Are you solving a problem and or are you enhancing society? So that's step one. If you get past that, most investors go into financial returns. I go into, let's understand the technology. Let's understand where the data sets are coming. Help me understand the algorithms. Let's look at the composition of who's informing the algorithms, especially when you're in service to a diverse consumer set. I get concerned when their advisory board and or their composition of who's informing them or their cap table is not diverse. And so I look at human bodies, diversity to help guide, inform, and advise the CEO. And then I always ask this question, like, what frameworks do you have in place to help detect bias? And they're like, what? I go, for example, you could automate the HR recruiting process. They leverage data of resumes that had high performing individuals. So they scan all those resumes in, and these are like our type A. We're going to go find talent that's similar, but those resumes were already biased based on some language or tone that was used. So what frameworks are you using to detect biases? And so for me, you have to go dig very deep into these new AI platforms and really keep on asking why. I always talk about like, peeling the onion, ask 5 whys. And if I'm still not satisfied with the answer, I keep on asking, which yesterday resulted in a follow-up meeting. Like, I'm still not clear on your algorithms and how they were developed. I really want to understand that more. This is a great example of why you need diversity in development of your algorithms. There was a technology that helped automate passports. And in the process, they learned that there was a specific cohort that was getting rejected. It was an ethnic group. What ethnic group do you think it was? It was Eastern Asian, because the eyes were closed and the algorithms couldn't decipher different eye shapes.
So interesting.
And so that to me is just a prime example. There was a technology that I was involved in that couldn't decipher the color of the floor from the people color because it was like brown. Well, we didn't have diversity, that, those engineers did not have diversity of color in that room. So, and then to me, like for the people that I have conversations around, it's the missed opportunity. It's the missed opportunity to capture a larger share. You lost and you underserved a large community, which is the Eastern Asian. You lost the people of color. And so I saw the question from Wandia around how many females do we have, or do we have enough females? The answer is no.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think recruitment is biased because the AI chatbots in recruitment are filtering out candidates that could be amazing. And what is it based on? It's based on algorithms. And to your point, Sandra, like how do you eliminate bias in hiring, right? All female founder panel here. We're all founders of our own companies, everyone on this panel. And there are not a lot of companies out there. I can tell you at the companies I've worked at, there are very few female senior executives, especially at a C-level, at a Fortune 500, Fortune 100 company. You're just, we're still in that spot that there's a glass ceiling, a lack of diversity, whether it's color or sex or whatever it may be. It's just, and AI is not necessarily helping that, right? That problem. I don't feel, certainly I feel like in the circles that I've been exposed to in marketing and AI and investor communities, we have not transitioned that gap of these recruitment tools that filter out great candidates just based on algorithms. You miss so much.
I agree, 100%. And I think for those people that are not in the United States, I just let you know, the United States, there's a big conversation around diversity and rhetoric around that. So we're moving backwards versus forwards. And the best thing I think we can do is we can use the examples that I just shared that affected the revenue potential for a business because we didn't have representation in the development of the algorithms and or the development of the technology. Maybe that's how we'll change it.
Chelsea, we have tons and tons of questions.
Yeah, let's go for the questions. I was just going to say we have 10 minutes left. Cindy Ann, do you want to pull out some of the questions? I know you've been following the chat a little better than I have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Wandir and Raman, you really asked some incredible questions. I know both of you, have worked with both of you, both have great minds. What amazing people. They're both founders. I think we did cover Wandir's question on conscience, with all the research done. There's some crucial nuances that are missed with ChatGPT, etc., and chatbots on the consciousness behind AI. I think one of the great questions that Raman asked was, I think, how might applied behavioral science shape the development of AI tools? And are we building highly effective behavior shaping technology simply in servicing to the invisible hands? So we shape our tools and then our tools shape us. So for example, I don't know if anyone wants to comment on the tools and the way we shape in tools and behavioral science with the development of AI tools. It's an interesting question. Thanks, Raman.
I'll just say to be human is to use tools. And what this specific tool does, it puts a mirror in front of us. It amplifies the flaws we have as humans. And if we find the reflection ugly because it reveals our innate biases and challenges, we can be mad at the tool. We can break the mirror, but that still does not solve the problem. So I understand the knee-jerk reaction to sort of zero in on AI because it amplifies it. But I think the answer to this bigger problems are within us, as humans, as folks who set up policies, as leaders when we show up. And I actually think that seeing that as that reflection and maybe adjusting our behavior. And then what I like doing is it was what I call a judo move. You use your opponent's energy against them. Because you can use AI to create transparency. My company does it every day. You can use AI to bring parenting plans to underrepresented communities that tend to highly correlate with race, gender, and all kinds of other things. Again, if you find the reflection ugly, time is not to throw away the tool. Time to ask, how can we show up better, and how can we use that technology to address it?
Yeah, that's great. I think it's a great question. I think also there were some few more questions. One dear spoke about missing a lot of insights with AI generated summaries, contentious areas around some of the real life examples. She's big on AI and have been for 13 years, but I think the value touted in AI is outsized. Also not a fan of the invisible hand, as stated by Raman. I don't know if everyone's following in the chat. There's a whole debate going on in the chat, which is so interesting.
And that means the reflection is powerful.
And Raman,
yeah, I think debate is really important because it creates listening to different perspectives so you can get to the better outcome of solutions in place. So I think it's great. I love the fact that I'm trying to keep up with the chat.
I think also Angelia comments to everyone, military drones have a 70% accuracy rate for persons of color related to Face ID prior to execution. She learned this whilst working in death row. Really interesting, Angelia. I think you're an attorney as well. I met you at the founder party, the investor VC party last week or 2 weeks ago at in the city that Founders Bay ran. I remember meeting you, and you're also an attorney, and you had some very interesting insights. So very scary, that comment.
What about what Hughes had to say?
Nancy kind of touched on the Hughes' Nancy. I think touched on. Interesting to hear Olga speak about family-focused AI tool, especially as much as work of organizing family schedules. Typically falls on the working mom in relationship. Curious to hear from the panel whether there are other opportunities to deploy AI that enables working parents to re-enter or excel in the workforce.
Broadly speaking, she says using AI to shift the anti-diversity inclusion shift.
Yeah. I mean, I think Olga did go into a lot of the parenting stuff already.
Yeah, agreed.
Then I think Raman had a question on whether the panelists have watched the TED Talk on AI and what their thoughts on Tristan Harris offers. So I don't know if anyone's watched that. And Grace Kim, in your experience with social impact companies, have you come across any business metrics that demonstrate both societal enhancement and financial returns? Wondering if there's a way to demonstrate the best of both worlds. I don't know if anyone wants to answer that.
I actually want to answer it maybe indirectly because I I actually think that we kind of have a broken relationship with money in the world, just sort of generally. I mean, the way we exchange value in this society is by using money. There's nothing inherently evil about money. It actually facilitates a lot of good transactions and commerce. And in fact, the best way you can sort of thank somebody is by having a commercial relationship, by giving them jobs. So I actually actively question the narrative of whether you can do good or make money. I think it's an and. It has to be an and because that's how we exchange value in this society. So I find it really interesting when I was graduating from law school. The narrative in my law school was you either go do good things in the world or you don't, you go work for a big law firm, for example. I think every time we find ourselves in this false dichotomy, we need to take another reflection and see what's happening in our lives, why we think that. Because I can tell you, I can do a lot of good things with money. Like a lot of and it doesn't have to be a philanthropy. And yes, it could be a philanthropy. And consumers, businesses increasingly they always put money where the value is. And when they're educated, when they have transparent relationship, when they understand the impact, they will put their money not only, where more money is made, but they will also put it to better use. So I actually think, and this is, I think, a massive opportunity for AI, not just, like I focus on contract as a proxy to your revenue, as in improving your relationship with money. It turns out that one of the reasons people value full disclosure and understanding of a contract, because that's a proxy of who you deal with. Because if you're willing not to put landmines in your contract and be open about it, it speaks about your character, who you are as a company. What do you value? Are you building a transactional thing that just sort of takes and runs? Or are you building a relationship that is deep? And technology can help you do that. And that should be inherently more valuable to you. Why wouldn't you pay for that? And so I really do think that that narrative we have in our head sometimes, that money is evil and all of those things. I think we really need to figure out how to empower people who do good and give them money, because I want money to be in the hands of people who do good every day, who get up in the morning and say, my basic needs are met. I spoiled myself a little and I have all this money that I can't spend in my lifetime. How can I improve the world? Like, that's where I would like the money to go, because I think those people can actually do a lot of good with money.
Wandir says, I don't think Elon would agree with that perspective.
Well, hence why I'm not carrying his child.
That's hilarious. I love it. You're so funny. Crack me up. I love Ramon's questions too. Ramon, you are you and Wandir are like really running this debate on the side in the chat.
On it.
But Wandir's question, Ramon's question is amazing. Money is an empty tool, parable of the hammer, but our broken relationship reduces almost all of our interactions to something transactional, whether self or other serving. If you're smart, ambitious, and industrious, the logic leads you here. So then he asks, what if AI could eliminate poverty and ecocide? Isn't this an ethical set of goals we can all agree on? What if it's meant that the most fortunate among us had less and were, among us, I just lost that, sorry a sec, had less and we were happier and lived in more stable and wiser society as a side benefit? Great question, Ramon. You're so inspiring. I don't know if anyone wants to take a stab at that or if it's just more of a comment.
I think it's a comment question.
Yeah. And then he also says, what if trillions of dollars were moved into pioneering experiments in demonstrating and de-risking regenerative movements and economy? What if nature had DARPA feed from short-term market forces? I'm loving all these questions. There was also like,
I mean, it's interesting. It's an interesting question to think about, like a very automated future, right? Where we collectively decide on things, and maybe we have decentralized autonomous organizations, also known as DAOs, where we collectively decide, separate from governments, how to organize societies. So these are good questions. What do we value essentially, and where does value go? Value is essentially money, right? Right now, this is how we account for money, is through value.
And then there was also a whole conversation about diversity, and I think Grace asked about diversity as well as Wandir, and Nancy also on this using AI to shift the anti-DEI shift. So diversity and the whole kind of question around AI with diversity. I think we touched on that earlier, but in terms of the DEI shift, does anyone want to take a stab at that real quick?
I just want to be conscious of time. We are at the top of the hour, so do we want to close things out? This
one last question, maybe to Sandra or Olga.
With us, I think we've talked about, like, we need more Olgas. We need more people like her and supporting her and her initiative so that we can drive the tipping point. We need more Cindy Ann's, we need more Chelsea's, we need more Romans. And so more of us that care about ethics and diversity, please.
Absolutely. Some really, really great questions today. Thank you everyone for your questions. Really phenomenal. And please feel free to reach out to Chelsea and I. You know, if you'd love a consult on AI strategy or business strategy, growth strategy, we're here. We Rethink. We're a team. Brandon's part of our team too. We do have one male in our team, so we have diversity in our team too. We're not all female founders at Rethink, but you know, we are very strongly weighted in that front. But it's just been so great today. Chelsea, do you want to do a wrap and thank everyone? And thank you for coming today from my side.
I mean, I think you did. That's great. Thanks everybody for joining us today, and have a beautiful day.